But I want to talk now about Ed Miliband's cabinet, about two key members of it. Ed Miliband, who is, of course, the Energy Secretary, and Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, because they have had a bit of a contretemps. They have said different things about what should have happened a few years ago, about 10 years ago, when there was a Commons vote to bomb Syria. That didn't happen. David Cameron was then the Prime Minister and lost that. Perhaps Philip Ingram, who's with us now, defence expert and former senior military intelligence officer, could actually just remind us what happened back in the day. Philip, I'm sure you were following this closely at the time. Can you just bring us through, just briefly, what happened between the Conservatives and Labour about 10 years ago, and the implications, of course, now, because we've seen the Assad regime fall in the last week?
Yeah, good morning, Peter. Well, 10 years ago, we had Bashar al-Assad using chemical weapons against the rebel-held territories and killing the civilian population because of it. The United States was trying to put a coalition together to bomb Assad and punish him for using those chemical weapons. And David Cameron decided that he would have a vote on it in Parliament because he was coming under some criticism for enabling military activity without Parliament taking a vote on it, and it was politicised from a domestic political perspective by the opposition, the then opposition, the Labour Party, who saw this as an opportunity just to undermine David Cameron rather than look at the international implications. So they voted against it, as did a majority of people. So we didn't join the Americans in bombing Assad, and now just over 10 years later, we've got Wes Streeting saying that that vote was wrong. The Labour Party was headed by Miliband then, and criticising Miliband for the politicisation of the vote. What's significant now, I think, is that we've got two cabinet ministers sort of at each other.
And actually, let's just remind ourselves what they've been saying. Wes Streeting was on Question Time talking about this. This was on Thursday night on the BBC. This is what he had to say.
That the hesitation of this country and the United States create a vacuum that Russia moved into and kept Assad in power for much longer. I think if the West had acted faster, Assad would have been gone.
And that was responded to the following morning, yesterday morning, to your colleagues on Times Radio, and Ed Miliband was questioned about this. This is what he had to say.
Now, we know that President Trump, when he was in power, bombed Syria in 2017 and 2018. Clearly, that didn't produce the fall of President Assad's regime. So when people say that somehow if we bombed President Assad in 2013, he would have toppled over, frankly, it's just wrong.
And actually, Wes Streeting then put a tweet out a little bit later on. He says, "I did not criticise Ed. On the contrary, I pointed out the challenges of hindsight, Libya, and the uncertainty we face about post-Assad Syria today." Says Wes Streeting, "It is frustrating, to put it mildly, to see a nuanced answer to a complicated issue presented as criticism of a good colleague." I'm not sure I entirely agree with Wes Streeting in terms of his characterisation there. What do you make of it, Philip?
Well, I have to agree with you. This is where the whips have turned around and said, "Come on, let's undo this spat that's inside the cabinet." And it's quite interesting. If Wes Streeting's statement at Question Time, the comment he made there, is applied to Ukraine, then we should be taking the gloves off, because if we don't take the gloves off and help Ukraine in every way possible, then Russia will march through it, and again it will tie in with expenditure on defence. And this is where we're beginning to see, I think, with this little cracks, if not fissures, inside the cabinet.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right, and it has happened before with Wes Streeting. In fact, he's been criticised recently, the Health Secretary, for making remarks about Louise Hay, who left the cabinet under a cloud because of her previous conviction, now spent for fraud. So certainly there are issues in the cabinet. Just in regard to Syria itself, where do you think we stand now, certainly from our perspective here in the UK? Because HTS, this grouping that is in charge of Syria, are a proscribed organisation. We can't deprescribe them and have diplomatic links or talks with Syria. At the same time, it's only a weekend and things are changing all the time. So what's your analysis, Philip?
Well, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, is one of a number of groups that are operating throughout Syria. They have captured Damascus and pushed Assad out, but they haven't got control of the whole of Syria. And therefore, they are trying to suggest to the West and to the other groups that they have changed, a leopard that has changed its spots, and that they're going to be the organisation to try and bring the different groups together. And they're looking to the international community and saying what the international community wants to hear, because they need the support, they need the money.
Do you believe them? When they're saying things like, oh, we want to bring the Druze in, we want to make sure the Christians are dealt with, and we want to make sure that there's love, peace and harmony and motherhood and apple pie, because I'm not sure I do.
This is one time when there's not enough information to believe them or not to believe them. You look at what they did.
Well, we can look at their past record.
Well, you look at their past record, and you look at the past record of other organisations in different areas. The Taliban in Afghanistan turned around and said they were going to be moderate, and they had changed and everything else. And then when they managed to get full power, they hadn't changed at all. In fact, they've got worse.
Yeah.
So that's the real danger here. It's the same in Libya. It's the same everywhere else. So going by looking at activities and actions in different countries, then they won't have changed, and it will all fall apart, and it'll probably be worse than Bashar al-Assad. But you have to have that hope. And if you look at what they did in Aleppo, whenever they controlled that area of Syria, they were slightly more moderate, but a lot of that was could be put down to the fact that they were trying to garner more support to get into the position to do this push that they've done. Now that they are pushing for absolute power, if they get absolute power across the whole of Syria, which by itself isn't guaranteed, there's still the other groups haven't acquiesced to their demands. But if they get absolute power, then do leopards really change their spots?
It's a great question we need to ask, I think, both in regard to just being generally interested in what happens in the Middle East, but also from our own national interests as well. Speaking of our own national interests, Philip, give us your thoughts on Prince Andrew. As Tom Tugendhat, who I interviewed about an hour ago, said, intelligence and Prince Andrew are not words you usually put in the same sentence.
Well, he's 100% right, and Prince Andrew, in every role that he's had, has got a level of arrogance that makes giving him advice really quite difficult, because he doesn't listen to it. I'm not surprised that he's been approached by and had a relationship with a senior Chinese spy. He will not have had any really sensitive information that will necessarily have given the Chinese any advantage whatsoever. There may have been a little bit when he was the trade envoy, but I suspect the individuals in the Department of International Trade, supported by Security Service and supported by MI6 overseas, will have made sure that there was nothing that was too sensitive that he will have been briefing. But Prince Andrew's arrogance, I think, is what has allowed him to bring this individual in. And the Chinese are very good. They're very plausible whenever they make approaches. I've been approached, and if I hadn't carried out counterintelligence operations for many years across Germany, the approach that was given to me was very credible indeed. I'd have easily fallen for it. But it shows that the Security Service have got good oversight, good overwatch, and have exposed this individual.